Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Question with Pastor Adam. And I am Adam, and I am pastor to believers and to doubters, to unfaithful Christians and to faithful atheists. And Jesus was not afraid of questions, and neither are we here at One Question with Pastor Adam. So we are here every Thursday at 11 o'clock to talk about questions that you may have. And if you have questions or comments and you want to put those in the chat section, I would love to bring those up. And the One Question with Pastor Adam is a product of the Raven Foundation, which you can find at ravenfoundation.org. And friends, here we are. We're going to talk about something fun today. And we have one of my favorite guests here today, Matthew Distefano, to talk about his book, The Wisdom of Hobbits, Unearthing Our Humanity at 3 Bagshot Row. And I am almost finished with the book. I am finding it fascinating. And I love this book in part because I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Matthew is going to be very disappointed in me because of this. But if you are a big Lord of the Rings fan, you're going to love this book. And if you are not a big Lord of the Rings fan, you are going to find so much in this book that is worth reading and that is awesome. So The Wisdom of Hobbits, Unearthing Our Humanity at 3 Bagshot Row. So hi, Joshua. Good morning to you. Matthew is you can find Matthew's work at All Set Free. Matthew is the author of so many books, including Heretic, From the Blood of Abel, Bonfire Sessions, Learning to Float, All Set Free, Devoted, AF. It's awesome. Matthew trying to get people to cuss. It's fantastic. So, and A Journey with Two Mystics. And you can also listen to Matthew and some friends on Heretic Happy Hour. This is going to be so fun. It's Heretic Happy Hour. Let's go and go on your favorite podcast and first subscribe to One Question with Pastor Adam, and then go to Heretic Happy Hour and Apostates Anonymous, both where you will find Matthew's excellent works. So Luke says, I am not a Lord of the Rings fan, but I am a Hobbit. So this is crucial. Good morning, Jeff and Lita. Good morning to you. There are so many great things about being a Hobbit that help us understand being human. And so I am going to bring in our dear friend Matthew now. And here he comes. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, what's up? My favorite pastor in all of America.
Oh gosh, you're just making me blush. I'm awesome. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here.
And no, I'm not even lying. You certainly are my favorite pastor.
Thank you. It's we've got a low bar for pastors, as you know. So,
well, you've crossed it and then some.
So, you are very prolific, my friend. You come out with a book like it feels like once every 6 months or something. You're doing, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. I think that's going to slow down here now that I'm in my 40s. But yeah, I've been doing that for a lot
of books.
now.
Your latest book is The Wisdom of Hobbits, and as Luke says, I am not a Lord of the Rings fan, but I am a Hobbit. And there's something like about hobbits that just kind of capture our imagination, whether we are big Lord of the Rings fans or not. I think my favorite of the books is The Hobbit. It just feels like it's a great fast pace, fun book. And so I'm excited to talk with you about the book. How did you get interested in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings?
It's really funny that you like The Hobbit and then it's fast paced and then you get to the Fellowship of the Ring and it takes you 2 to 3 chapters to get out of the Shire. Right? Yeah. I got into, well, I read The Hobbit. It was required reading in junior high back in the late 20th century. Or no, my daughter likes to say the late 1900s. It's a terrible thing to hear. I read it in junior high, and then I read The Lord of the Rings as an adult. So I wasn't Like, it didn't hook me initially when I was 13 or 14, but what does a
Mhm.
13 or 14-year-old know? Well,
When
at
I
least
was
I
that
didn't,
age,
right? I didn't know any better.
I was like, "I
But
hate
then
this
once I
book
start
because you're forcing me to read it." Right, right,
yeah, exactly. It could have been the greatest piece of literature of all time, and
right.
you're telling me what
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do, so, no, thank you. Um So I've gotten into it more incrementally as an adult. I got into reading and books and writing and now publishing. So obviously I had to read them because they're, important pieces of literature. And then, obviously I saw
Mhm.
Peter Jackson's films, and I think it's a combination of, I mean, obviously I like Tolkien's writing style. I like that it takes a long time to get
Uh-huh.
from point A to point B, other than in The Hobbit, which is more, it's more in a similar vein of like how C.S. Lewis
Mhm.
writes, and it's more like Narnia than the style of The Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers and Return are much. I like that. I like the development of the characters in a
Yeah.
slow, methodical, developing story. I also, being a Gerardian, I love mythology, and Tolkien creates a world of myth that is, I think, second to none. Well, I mean, the Bible is good, but
It's amazing.
the Tolkien's world is just as good.
It's the world that he created is just amazing. Like all kinds of well, like new languages and just the
Yeah,
in depth, how in depth he gets with it all. It's just amazing. So yeah,
yeah.
Joshua says, "I'd like to visit the hobbits, who appear to be a rural community." Well, Joshua, let's just hop right into that. Where do hobbits live, and what is their relationship like with the rural community, the earth that they have?
Yeah, so hobbits, I mean, when we're talking where do hobbits live, generally we think of the Shire, we think of we think of Jackson's films, we think of hobbits living in holes, burrows, smiles as they're called, in the ground. There are hobbits who live outside of the Shire in Bree and elsewhere. But generally we're talking, to get super nerdy, in the Third Age, the Shire was where most hobbits lived. And their relationship to the earth, I think, is probably the most idealized part of them. I mean, these are what people would say is like an idealized version of rural England where
Mm,
Tolkien lived.
okay.
And so this is kind of a but they, I mean, they have their downfalls, but their relationship to the earth is certainly, I wouldn't say, one of them. They are agrarian. They're very, like, the joys of life are found in the simple things of growing food and harvesting food and then making food and eating food with other people and smoking pipe weed and hanging out at the Green Dragon or being in your garden. Like, that's where I'm going to be going later and all this weekend because
Mhm.
it's late April in California, so we will be living the rural lifestyle this weekend and planting in our garden and doing all that kind of stuff. So that's, we can get into it more, but
Yeah.
that is really what draws me to hobbits, and especially Sam, who is a gardener. And in the book, I counter that, and Tolkien, I think, does a brilliant job of that, of countering that with someone like Saruman, who sees the world as, well, the way capitalism he sees it, as something to be exploited and something to put dollar signs next to.
Now, who is Saruman?
So Saruman is one of the wizards. He is, at one point, the highest in Gandalf's order. Gandalf is the wizard who accompanies both Bilbo during his adventures and Frodo during his. And then Saruman, because of the desire for power, which, coming from a mimetic theory lens,
Okay.
obviously, we could talk more about that. But he kind of changes power and his own ego go to his head, and then, he once had a very close relationship. Wizards are messengers of God, right? They're come to do
Oh,
the goodness of God, to be the hands and feet of God, to to help bring about a good end, some sort of end. And Saruman kind of flips because of power and greed and all that. And so he goes from walking in the forest and seeing the trees as his friends to seeing trees as lumber, which can be used for, the development of a war machine, the development of industry. So I like how Tolkien he kind of gives us that juxtaposition of, here's how you can live in relationship to the earth, and here's how you can live as seeing the earth as something to be exploited. And there are two ends that we can choose, and how relevant to today with climate change and with things like
What
that.
is going on when is Tolkien writing these books? Is it
Over the course of decades,
okay?
right? Like after World War I into the 30s, 40s, and
Okay, so
50s.
he's writing.
And then, of course, like changing things and adapting them, because he's creating a mythology with stories, and so he's adding, and he's so yeah, over the course of like his whole life after World War One.
Okay, so he's got World War I in the background, and he's also writing basically during
Sure.
World War II, right? So he's writing in that context, and do we know if he's like intentionally like writing a story that is reflective of the growing military industrial complex at the time, and writing a critique of human violence?
I think in many ways he was in World War One. Many of his friends died. I know one friend, George Batch Smith, was a poet who died in World War One. That Tolkien published his collection of poetry posthumously. So I mean, he had close friends that he watched die. And so we wouldn't want to say he's creating like an allegory or
Okay.
a metaphor, but he certainly knows that his experiences are influencing the writings. Like war in Middle Earth and all the tales, especially Lord of the Rings, like war is a last resort, and it's almost like a distraction. It's not war that actually, spoiler alert, it's not a war that saves the people. It becomes a distractionary tactic for Frodo to then get to the point where he can destroy the ring.
Okay.
It's not like Aragorn's forces overwhelm Sauron and then they storm the castle.
Mm.
So I think that plays into it, because he saw World War One, like trench warfare, like the worst of it, really, right? So of course those things are going to shape everything you write.
Yeah.
As Tolkien would roll in his grave if we're saying it's an allegory. It's not, but
Okay. Good.
yeah, certainly influence. Like we're all influenced
Yeah.
by everything we go through,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That's fascinating. So Luke says hobbits live in our hearts. That's the answer to the question that I asked earlier. That's good.
There you
There you
go.
go. I like that.
Yeah.
Mark says, I have never read The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, but saw the movies. I had the books, haven't gotten through them. I tried to get through them and got it's like when you try to read the Bible and you get to Leviticus and you're like, I'm done.
I'm done.
I got
Well, if I could say, if you don't want to read it, Robert Inglis has a great
oh,
audio version, and he does it's brilliantly read.
okay.
So if you're like on a long road trip, it's fantastic.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I got through halfway through the Twin Towers and there was like just couldn't get out of the forest. So but the forest.
Well, it's a two
Oh, the
tower, so
2
obviously
towers.
it didn't
Yes,
connect you.
that's but the forest, going back to the forest and the, ecology and the, using natural resources for greed, for war. You brought up climate change, and the dangers that we have today. You talk a little bit about that. You talk about that in the
Yeah.
book. Can you say a little bit more about, these two different ways of treating the earth and how important that is for the hobbits and also for us today?
Yeah, it's actually the one thing I got a critical it wasn't even a critical review for the book, but that was part of his critique, was that because I mentioned climate change, I got quote unquote political. And I guess I took that to mean like you got partisan, which is ridiculous because I'm not. Like I approach climate change as simply like just as like scientifically, not necessarily like, I'm not saying, if I say climate change, I'm not saying like all the proposed things to curb climate change are great. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying anything political necessarily, right? I'm just saying like, but I also balance that and say Tolkien's not arguing for climate change, right? He's not arguing against climate change. He's writing pre or mid-industrial, pre our understanding of the effects of it, right? I'm just saying that it seems like Tolkien, the way he describes industry and what can happen after industry, and climate change are saying the same thing.
Mm.
There's two distinct things. It's in Tolkien's writings that I point to. It's Saruman going into the forest to take the lumber out to create the war machine,
Yep.
and that leads to his downfall. They break the dam, and the water that they dammed up rushes and floods out Isengard, and then he's left on his tower for a time, and the Ents guard him there. And then it's not in Jackson's films, but in the end of the Return of the King, the hobbits don't return to the Shire. They return to the Shire that's been Saruman eventually gets away, and he destroys the Shire and industrializes it. And so when it shows that when like I wish they included that in the movies, because it shows what happens when this comes to your own land. And the hobbits, even many of the hobbits go astray. And what happens to it? The old mill gets destroyed for a new mill. The houses are laid waste. It becomes a police state. There's a lot of sheriffs. And so they have to clean the Shire and bring it back to what it once was. And they have to basically defund the police.
And
they have to go back to what they used to have.
They didn't put that in the movies, the defunding the police?
Well, they wouldn't have put it in that language because it's 20
Right.
years ago, right? But I mean, that's essentially what happens in the Scouring of the Shire. They return, they get rid of industry, they replace the trees that have been felled, and then they fire all the police officers and go back to the 12. There's 3 in each farthings. For 4 farthings, they have 12 police officers for the whole entire Shire. And so, yeah, I mean, I love that because it's like the hero's journey. They come back and they have to bestow upon their community the things that they learned in their adventure. In the movies, you don't get that. They just come home and they're good.
Oh man.
Well, Frodo had, but I love that part where they have to clean their own land from war, industry, all that kind of stuff. And that's what we have to do as people with climate change and with war. We have the same exact what choice do we have in front of us? And Tolkien seems to give us 2 answers. Like, we could take one way, or we could take the way to destruction. It's almost like Jesus talked about that too.
Right? Yeah. What role what do we know about Tolkien and his faith and what he was Catholic, right?
Yeah, he was devoutly Catholic. Yeah. My 2 favorite thinkers, Gerard and Tolkien,
right? Yeah, it's awesome. What role did he say that his faith had in creating the books, or what do you see there?
Well, I mean, yeah, Christians love this. He explicitly states that Lord of the Rings is kind of Christian, right? It's a Catholic text, basically. In one of his letters, he says something like that. I see it as, I mean, many of it is what he would call pre-Christian. It's influenced by Norse, Celtic mythology. I mean, he's a philologist, a linguist, a mythologist. So he's not creating a Christian allegory like Lewis did with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, for instance, right?
Okay.
But he's creating a mythology, I think, that would maybe be pre-Christian. So many of the themes are there, but it's like many of the characters are archetypal rather than metaphors for like Christ or anything.
Okay.
And we see those themes there. We see the themes of self-sacrifice. We see the themes of fate and free will. We have all that, but I mean, I would say it's influenced by his Catholicism, but Catholics are as diverse as Protestants, right?
Yeah.
And Tolkien was influenced by George MacDonald, who was a Scottish Universalist, right? And so, same with Lewis. So it all, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's influenced by his version of, but Gerard's Catholicism and Richard Rohr's Catholicism is much different than a lot of Catholics too.
That's interesting. In Lewis's book, the final book of Narnia, The Last Battle, he gets criticized by many Christians because looks like he's moving towards universalism, universal salvation, right? What do you see that in the Lord of the Rings? Do you see anything like that there? Or?
For sure. Tolkien was really careful to not insert his own beliefs into. I mean, we
Right.
can't help
Yeah.
but do that. But what I mean by that is his own characters have. It's like the Bible. It's
Yeah.
multivocal. It's Gerard talks about the multi-voice, the different voices in Scripture. You have like almost Jewish midrash in some of Tolkien's writings of elves talking to men about the fate of humanity.
Mm.
And there's an elf who says, like, how can God, who loves all God's children, allow any of his children to like perish or to be like, it's like this universalist stuff. There is prophecy about a second music of the Ainur, which is the you'll appreciate like the mythology that goes. So the fall of man in Tolkien's world has to do with dissonant melodies and discord in a song.
Mm.
So that's the motif we get. At the end, though, it's a second music that's void of all of the dissonance that once was, and the idea would be that all of the Atani, the human race, would join in that.
Oh, interesting.
So there are these really. I've written an article for Pathos. Was Tolkien a universalist? We don't know,
Sure.
but Tolkien, I think, understood it well enough to insert it into his own narrative and have it be a belief of the characters in his world. So take that, from that what you may.
Yeah, interesting. Joshua says,
But I think that's
go
the
ahead.
genius. That's the
Yep.
genius. Sorry, that's the genius of a mythologist. He's not trying to tell you what to believe. He's trying to create literally a world that would,
So
if
good.
you flew in as an alien and found it next to the Bible, you wouldn't know which one is real and which one is fiction.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, many people are surprised that universalism is an idea that runs throughout Christian history. They always think it's, a modern heresy and stuff. But here we have like one of the most profound Catholic thinkers, at least presenting that as an option for us of the 20th century. So that's fascinating. So Joshua says, the books remind me of the David the Gnome cartoon. I'm not familiar with David the Gnome cartoon. Do you know about? No, but I am familiar with, Joshua says, or a Legends of Zelda game with a sort of old weird Americana vibe. So might be a British vibe. But this brings up one of the main themes of the stories and of your book, which is adventure, which is as you brought up, the hero's journey. You see that in the Legend of Zelda and all the great stories that I've read. Right, any good one has these
Any
themes,
good
right?
one,
So, can
right?
you
Yeah,
tell? Can you talk a little bit more
yeah.
about that? The role of adventure. I mean, the hobbits have a very interesting relationship with adventure. Some of them, you typically
Mhm.
hobbits. I don't know, how would you say? They like to stay home. They like they're homebodies, right? Yeah, they like to
Yeah,
be in their
homebodies.
garden
Yeah,
and what did you say? The
yeah.
smoke, the grass weed. Is that what it is? The pipeweed. I mean, the world would be such a
Pipeweed.
better place if we just all smoked pipeweed and hung out, right? So, right?
I
Yes, that's a good
that's my
thesis.
thesis, really, in a
Talk a
nutshell.
little bit about the role of adventure and the homebodies of the hobbits.
Yeah, so I think The Hobbit in the first page starts out with like, hobbits detest adventures, nasty, disturbing things. Makes you late for dinner. Um, and so I start by quoting that in like the first page or two of my book, because generally, yeah, hobbits are insular. They are, you know, if you live 30 miles away, you're weird.
Yeah.
You know, and they talk about this like the Lord of the Rings starts out with a bunch of hobbits gossiping. So yeah, they are very insular, and I love being at home. Don't get me wrong. I tolerate traveling. I love being home in my garden. But the extraordinary hobbits are the ones who step outside the borders and go on an adventure. And Bilbo does that. Frodo does that. Sam does that. Merry and Pippin. And these are the hobbits, I think, that grow the most and learn the most
Mm.
and see the wide world. And those are the kind of hobbits, when we talk about models, that we would want to be, because we realize that our presuppositions about others are often wrong. And when we're closed off to people not like us, we don't really live. We only see a portion of the world. And the Shire is beautiful in its rustic, charming way, but if you stay there only, you miss everything else. So then what's that translate to us? If you stay in your church pews your whole life and you never go, if you never befriend a gay person, a trans person, a black person, a queer person, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, if you just hang out with your straight white friends, assuming that's what you are, but I mean, apply it however you want. If you just stay with your group, it's great to have a group of like-minded people, but it's also, we grow when we come into contact with people who have vastly different worldviews, right?
It's one of the great things about your book is how you examine the role of xenophobia and prejudice that runs throughout the stories, right? Especially with the hobbits. Where do you find that in the stories? Like, what are the hobbits? Are the hobbits prejudiced towards big folk, men?
They're leery of big folk. They're prejudiced against each other who live. I think like Hobbiton and Bywater would be 50 miles maybe from Buckland, and folks are queer there. And of course, queer going back to, they're not literally queer, but
1940
the way we use it, 1940s queer. They're odd. They're strange. I'm glad that the queer community has reclaimed that word from a pejorative. Tolkien didn't mean it as a pejorative. It became a pejorative, and now it's been reclaimed, which I think is great. But no, I mean, the point being is like, they're 50 miles away. They're of the same race. They probably know each other a little bit at least, and they're just totally judgmental. And there's this great line when Frodo is in Rivendell with Gandalf. He wakes up from his wound, and he says, "Oh yeah, well, we didn't really know anything about them, but we had a very strong opinion of Aragorn anyway. Even though we don't know about men, we don't really meet them. Men, capital M, humanity.
Right.
We don't meet big folk, but we're gonna have a really strong opinion of them anyway." And I think that's really telling. So I try to highlight that in the book too. How often do we do that? Oh, I've never met this kind of person, but I have a really strong opinion of them. I mean, it happens so often.
Let's see. Luke says, "War never saves the people when the dust settles." It probably just destroys all of us. War does. What this brings up an important point in your book and in the story, which is good and evil. And so often, maybe Tolkien falls into this. I don't know. I'd like to hear what you think. But so often, like we can have such a simplistic view of the good guys and the bad guys, and Saruman is such an evil person that it just seems like all of evil falls in Saruman and Sauron, and all of the good is in maybe Frodo or Samwise, right? What is the relationship between good and evil in the story?
Really, really complicated, right? Just like it is for us, which I think which makes me think that Tolkien really understands human culture and human behavior. Like, one thing I point out in the book is Frodo gets to the precipice to destroy the ring, and he doesn't. And if Gollum isn't there to bite his finger off, and spoiler alert, and fall into the mountain himself, I pose the question rhetorically in the book, but it's kind of obvious. Like, what happens to Frodo? Like, he probably puts the ring on and walks down the mountain, disappears so Sam can't see him. Walks down the mountain, and what? If he gets away, then what? He probably becomes just like Gollum eventually. And so it's complicated, right? It's not that Frodo isn't a great guy. It's not that he isn't a hero. It's just that we're all complicated and messy. And so what really when you think about the whole story, what really saves Middle-earth is pity and mercy. Bilbo, for all intents and purposes, should have killed Gollum. If I were in Sam and Frodo's shoes, and Frodo and Gollum was with us, I probably would have killed him, because you can't trust him. He doesn't have a will of his own. He only has Sauron's will to get the ring, which you have. So he's going to find a way to try to get it. So we would be better off to just kill this guy. And if they do, he's not at the end to really help evil be destroyed by itself.
Well, say more about that. That evil gets destroyed by itself. That evil is self-destructive.
Yeah, it like turns in. I mean, if you think about, I mean, yeah, yes, good characters, good hobbits, good people do very good things to get it to a place where it destroys itself. But what is, I mean, in Tolkien makes it pretty plain that the ring and Sauron are tied together.
Mm.
The ring is trying to get back to Sauron. Sauron is trying to get the ring. So, and where's the only place that it can be destroyed? Where Sauron is in Mount Doom. So, in drawing itself home,
Mm.
it draws itself to the place where it can be destroyed. And then the good guy doesn't even throw it in. The guy, Gollum, who is no longer Smeagol, like Smeagol's gone. Gollum is now intimately tied to the ring and Sauron, which is just an extension. The ring is an extension of Sauron's will. Brings it to where he bites the finger off of Frodo,
Mm.
puts on the ring, and slips into the. So it's as if evil. It's like the question. If there's no hell, are you going to keep sinning anyway? No, because sin is so self-destructive, it's self-evident.
Mm.
It leads you in the same way to your own destruction. In the same way, evil is so counterintuitive that it can only fall in and collapse upon itself and destroy everything in its path. So the reason we don't do evil is self-evident. It's going to destroy you. You're not going to, even the most noble hobbit can't overcome it. And that's sobering, honestly, to me. I think then it leaves room for the grace of God.
How so? Say more about the grace of God.
Well, if any of us think that we would have done better than Frodo, we wouldn't have, because I mean, Frodo's the ultimate like good character that we think, right? We think he's, I mean, he struggles obviously, right? But if you had to pick good guys and bad guys, he's the hero of the story. Well, Sam is. Tolkien says that. I agree.
Yeah.
But he's the main character of the story. We would think that he would overcome evil, but he doesn't. So thereby, how would Frodo be saved? Only by the grace of God. That's nothing Frodo could have done. He did everything that he could have humanly possible, hobbitly possible done.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll say so this is the ring of power that they are fighting over. What is the role of power in the stories?
Power is to be rejected. Even if you're going to do it for good. Gandalf's offered the ring.
Yep.
Galadriel's offered the ring. No doubt they would intend it for good.
Yeah.
And they would turn into the most powerfully destructive force the world has ever known.
That is so interesting to me. The relationship between this desire for power and trying to use it, what we think for is good, and how it just gets corrupted. Power corrupts our desire for good.
Yeah.
Is that would you say, put it like that, or?
Yeah. And so what would this mean for Tolkien's type of
Yeah.
faith? What would this mean for Tolkien's version of Catholicism? Certainly not the it's certainly not the type of, like we see in America, Christian dominionism. We're going to get power for the good of God.
Yes, good example.
We know where this is going to go, right? We know this is where this is going to go. To think, and so this is a figure like Jesus is so like ironic that we use someone like Jesus as a symbol of power and dominion. Like absurd. Everything should be flipped on its head, and I think Tolkien's faith understood that. Power was to be rejected. The hobbits, which is he considers himself one, would never have power over anything.
Yeah. What about is there a different kind of power in the Lord of the Rings? I don't know if it's fair. Like the power of, I mean, friendship is huge. Fellowship, right? I don't know if that would be a kind of power. There's a kind of agency maybe in that, where they talk about friendship in the story, and if you want to relate that to power, feel free to do that. But.
I think in I've done social work for a long time. There was a social worker, I can't think of her name. She came up with it's like when we think of our models of power, it's a power over.
Yep.
And when we're dealing with kids, even doing things for kids, when I worked with people with like cerebral palsy or autism, even doing something for them, it often looked like I was doing nothing for them at the grocery store. But to do it for them, because it's not at the pace that people in line want it to be, right?
Yeah.
And I get that. But to do it for them is a power over them.
Mm.
To do it with them is almost to stand by there and do nothing until they need you, or you have that relationship where you have that, like, hey, can you help me out? And so friendship is like that. It's a power with someone. It's empowering someone to stand on their own 2 feet and stand alongside them and be there for them, but really to allow people their own agency and their own ability to make choices. And so if you want to talk about it, power, I like using terms and then flipping them on their
Yeah,
head.
good.
It's like are you a slave to love? Well, those words are mutually exclusive, right?
Yep.
But if you use them as a way to like flip it, that's why I think we use that. Jesus uses that language as well. It's kind of like the power of the cross. Well, what power is there? There's no power there.
Mhm.
Well, we can reframe it in a certain way. So I think, yeah, the power of friendship, power with people, are themes throughout. Yeah, hobbits have power in that way. In that way, they have the only power you can have.
Mm.
Um, in holding things loosely or not grasping them at all.
So the only power that you can have is the power of friendship, the power of, you talk about love in the book.
Yeah.
What?
The only power that's not going to destroy you, really. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to be very careful about, and I think Tolkien helps us with that. We have to be very careful of thinking that like we would be above this lure of
Yes.
power.
Yeah.
Oh, we would never be like Gollum. Gandalf says, "I know a lot of very good hobbits who would end up exactly like that." So it's not to say we don't hold people in power responsible, but we can't hold them responsible void or devoid of the systems in place that allow for that to happen. So we can't talk about racist people without talking about systemic racism. We
Mm.
can't talk about homophobic people without talking about uh, anti-LGBTQ plus legislation
Mhm.
and systems of power that continue to oppress. To talk about one without the other would it's defeat. It's pointless, right? It's like, yeah, okay. Nick Fuentes is racist. Okay, so is Kanye or something.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like true,
Yeah.
but we better be talking about systemic racism also,
Yeah.
or primarily, right?
Yeah. Yeah. This, how does that show up in the books? This relationship between individual responsibility, I guess, and also systemic issues that are happening
Mm.
within the narrative of the story.
Yeah, I think about it a lot with like when it comes to like free will, how free are we really? It's like, and we don't get an answer a lot. We get like these sort of balanced answers or nuanced answers. It's not one thing or over the other. I think it does a very good job of saying that individual choices matter. Frodo's choices matter. Sam's choices matter, but also like, am I my brother's keeper?
Mm.
Yes, that's the implied answer,
Mm.
and that's prevalent throughout. Like no one gets. Frodo admits this. He doesn't get very far without Sam. No one, they don't even get to Bree without Sam, let alone Mordor. So the power of friendship, the power of fellowship, the power of a common goal of diverse people, I think that are diverse races. That would be the point of the fellowship. You have dwarves, elves, humans, and hobbits. You have 4 different races working together for one common goal. So it's a balance. But each has their own individual choices within that.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of, you've mentioned Rene Girard a few times, how he talks about how we're not so much individuals, but we are
Yes.
interdividual, right? Which really goes
Right. Yeah.
against many of, predominantly here in the United States, our kind of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps mentality, kind of an individualism mentality that is so
Mhm.
dominant here, that I built this all by myself kind of mentality, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that
Well, and there's some truth to
yep.
some of it, which is the main theme of the book really is balance. There's nothing like I live in the space between Gen X and millennial, like 1982.
Mhm.
It's right in that weird spot. I grew up thinking I was Gen X until all of a sudden I was like, I'm a millennial, I guess, technically. So we're like totally the forgotten generation. So I get that old school, like, pull yourself up, like, you want it done, go get it done.
Mhm.
But we've taken that and we took it to it goes to 11 for
Yeah.
Spinal Tap fans. It goes to 11. Like, we turned it all the way up +1. We have to find balance in the individualism and the community. Because what kind of individual are we without our community? No one pulls themselves up by their bootstraps.
Mhm.
We are so informed by one another, way below conscious awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
The only difference is some of us are conscious about
Yes.
that.
Yes. No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered all the questions that I had for you, and we don't have any more questions in the comment section. So, friends, if you've got questions or comments you want to bring in, feel free to do that. This is fun here.
Can I plug something real
Please
quick?
do.
So on this Saturday, which is in 2 days, between 4 and 7 p.m., Thomas J. Ord is hosting myself and a bunch of folks like Trip Fuller,
Yeah.
Cami Agan, a bunch of Tolkien nerds and heads and scholars. We're having like an online conference. So from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturday. It'd be better if you read the book, my book first,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if you haven't read the book, we're basically all the scholars are going to be presenting a 15-minute talk on themes from the book, and then I'll respond, and then there'll be Q&A. So if you are a Tolkien nerd, or even if you're not and you want to go deep, like, this is the chance.
Amazing. How
So
do we?
that's this Saturday. Yeah.
We had Tom on at one of our church events 2 weeks ago. So talked about his new book, The Death of Omnipotence.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I like that.
It's good.
I mean, he's all into that open theology stuff, right?
Yep.
So the powerlessness of God. Yeah, I'll just put. I sent you a little link there. I don't know if you could post that in some sort of show notes.
Oh yeah. Where did you send it to me?
In the host chat.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't look like I can comment on the public.
Okay, here I will. Oh, it won't let me copy and paste. I'll get that in there in the comments.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And that's awesome.
It's only like $20 for like 3 hours. It's really
amazing, cool. Amazing.
Everything will be on Zoom.
Joshua says millennials are a generation in transition, and I believe we must strike a balance somewhere. So that's the main, as you say, that's one of the main themes of the books, right? Is striking a balance.
Yeah, there's the balance between an adventure and a home. We didn't talk about this, like we talked about adventure, but there is the balance of like, having roots down somewhere is good.
Yeah.
Well, my experience.
Yeah.
Some people like to go on adventure after adventure, but I have found that to be exhausting.
Yes. What is good about having roots and settling down? Like,
I'll use the garden analogy. So in 2018, we had the campfire, which wiped out basically all of Paradise, California. And we had a huge garden at my friend Mike's house, who I wrote the bonfire sessions with. And it took out everything after 5 years. And you build soil, you watch trees grow, you're doing all this stuff for 5 years. And then it got wiped out. And so now we're in our 4th year of rebuilding it. And you can't do that if you're always on the run.
Yeah.
And to watch that cultivation and watch that growth, it really is. There's a reason I think Tolkien loved trees. Like when you grow fruit trees and you see them after 4 years and they're finally giving you fruit, it's like, finally.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely delayed gratification. Like you don't plant a tree and eat fruit that season. You eat a good peach in 5, 6, 7 years.
That's good. Jeff says hippies had the right idea, but too many sold out. That might be the desire for power. That's the desire for the ring.
That's well, what did Reaganomics promise and all that kind of stuff?
Trickle down economics and
like, okay, if we do it this way, we're gonna get ours.
Yeah.
And so we got into that sort of like hyper individualistic, capitalistic type of mentality. And it went way too far. I think I agree. Like, in an ideal situation, I own a business. I want the money to trickle down to the authors. That's why we give them a better deal than we give ourselves. I want to help, but for real,
Mm,
most companies ain't doing that.
no,
It's not going to happen.
no. Yep.
It's not.
Yep. Yep. Jessica says, I just love hugging trees.
I would have made fun of that in my 20s,
Mhm.
20 years ago.
Mhm.
And now I kind of get it. Like I truly cried like when I saw our fruit trees had burned down, like in the fire in our garden, like, and now that we have replanted it, like I do love the trees that I've planted, and they're, I get it.
I
Go hug a tree, people.
Yeah. I was in Central Park many years ago in New
Mhm.
York, and there was this tree, and it had a sign on it that said, hug me or something like that. And
Yeah.
so I went up to it and I hugged it. And this is going to sound really cheesy, but there was something so like grounded,
Mhm.
connected in that experience. There was something like firm, uh, something that just connected me to this tree, to the earth. It sounds really cheesy coming out of my mouth, but it was like I was just smiling the whole time as
Mhm.
I was hugging this tree.
There you go, man. You got your hippie
Right?
on.
Yes.
You might be a hobbit,
I might be
Adam.
a
You
hobbit.
might be a hobbit.
Underneath it all, I might be a hobbit. As Luke says,
That's right.
hobbits live in our hearts. And
Yeah.
thank you, Michael or Matthew, for bringing in the wisdom of hobbits, unearthing our humanity at 3 Bagshot Row. What is 3 Bagshot Row a reference to?
Oh, so 3 Bagshot Row is Sam's address when he leaves the Shire,
Okay.
before he takes over Bag End. The cover art, I had to put a note in there for all my Tolkien deep divers. The cover has the green door, which would be Bag End, which is not 3 Bagshot Row.
Okay.
So I had to put a note on why the subtitle didn't match the cover, and I wanted to have both on there because I gravitate most towards Sam. I see him as the ideal hobbit.
Okay.
And so I wanted to show that like he starts at 3 Bagshot Row and what he gets at the end is Bag End.
What makes Sam the ideal hobbit?
Other than him gardening, I think he shows the most growth. He goes from an aw shucks type of hobbit to, I think, the hero of the story.
Hmm.
Between him saving Frodo from the Tower of Cirith Ungol, to fighting off Shelob, to carrying the ring and just freely giving it back to Frodo. I think the type of growth we see in him is the most profound. All of them grow in some way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I lean more towards him because he's a gardener. They even changed his name to Gardener after the fact because
Hmm.
he's such a good gardener.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How did you draw this cover? How did this cover come about?
No way, man.
This is
No, that's
amazing.
Rafael Polendo.
This
No, he's amazing.
is a great cover. Worth the
Yeah,
price of the
Rafael
book.
Polendo is fantastic.
Yeah.
He should win awards for every cover he does.
I mean, the cover is worth the price of the book, and the text inside is worth more than the price of the book. So thank you,
Well, thank you.
Matthew, for this book. And if people want to keep up with you, how can they do that?
Facebook, Instagram.
Okay.
I'm technically on TikTok, but Quoir.com, Quoir.com is our publishing company. Allsetfree.com is my website. I write for Pathos sometimes. Yeah, you'll find me out there.
Nice.
If you know Adam, you'll find me.
Nice. And tell us a bit about your podcasts.
What do you want to know?
I want to know.
Heretic Happy Hour has been going around since 2017. So
it's a good run.
Isn't that wild? That's a good run.
That's a good run.
Yeah. No, I'll say this. We have really exciting. So now that I own a publishing company, we also started a podcast network, and we actually just signed a distribution deal with Pathos.
Wow.
So we have the Quoircast network. We have Heretic Happy Hour, Apostates Anonymous, the New Evangelicals,
Amazing.
bunch of others. And so yeah, check them all out. Heretic Happy Hour has been like our flagship show for a long time. I'm now a producer, so I don't talk as much anymore, which I love.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, there's like 4 hosts plus guests, so that audio gets a little messy. So everything you hear on Heretic Happy Hour sounds the way it sounds because of me. All right, we don't forget that.
That's good. That's good.
No,
Awesome.
it's fun.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Well, friends, highly recommend The Wisdom of Hobbits, Unearthing Our Humanity at 3 Bagshot Row. And whatever book you can get your hands on from Matthew Distefano, I highly recommend them. Heretic is awesome and fun. From
Thank you.
the Blood of Abel is, we've talked about Renee Girard multiple times. From the Blood of Abel is a fantastic book on Renee Girard, and we talked a little bit about universal salvation today.
Yeah,
So that was
we
fun.
did.
So go get All Set Free, which that was your first book, right?
Yeah, that was 2016. I would have no idea what I said in that book, but I'm sure it's fine. I was heavily still Christian at the time. I don't think about it as much anymore. But yeah, so that's a defense of Christian universalism.
Oh, okay. So what would
Yeah,
you are not heavily Christian now? Are you lightly
I don't.
Christian? What does that mean?
I might have my pinky toe in the waters. I don't know, man. I don't think about it. I try to
Okay.
do good. I
Yeah.
try to do good for my family and my loved ones and my friends. I try to run a business ethically. I try to be other oriented. I'm very Christian when it comes to my uh, attempt to be non-rivalrous and
Mm,
non-imitative in a negative way and non-scapegoating. So in
yeah.
that way, I'm very Christian. I just don't think about it. I don't go to church.
Yeah.
I don't pray in any traditional way. I try. I would much rather if I die and meet Jesus, and he is the creme de la creme that everyone says he is. I hope he's just like, hey man, the best work you did was when you did not even talk about me.
Mm,
Like that. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make everyone's life better.
that's beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you for
And if it's
being.
not good enough and I go to hell, well, I hope I have some friends there with me. No, I hope no
Oh,
one's with me, really.
yeah, right? Yeah.
Hey,
No.
did you ever play that game in your head? I know we're running out of time. Where you'd say, "Hey, if you were proposed like to have your mom or your dad or your wife or your whatever, if you could go to hell for them of all eternity, would you?" You ever play that when you believed in hell? I used to play that in my
I
head.
know. I
Oh, it's terrible.
that's all
I don't recommend it.
I have played. I do often think about, well, if this person was on a cliff and this other person was on a cliff and I could only save one of them, what would I do? And then I would say,
Uh,
get that out of your mind, Adam. That's not real life. So stop it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That reminds me of that. Wasn't there a Macaulay Culkin, the good son,
I
where
don't know
she's
that.
like holding? I think she's like holding. The mom is like holding the biological kid, and then the adopted kid,
Oh,
and the biological kid's just a monster, right?
yeah.
And the adopted kid's like a sweet angel. And
Uh-huh. Okay.
I think she drops the biological kid. I
Okay.
think. I don't remember. Jeez, man.
All
This movie
right.
sucks.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Great conversation. Yeah, the
It
wisdom
took a
of
left turn, but
Hobbits.
that's okay.
The
Yeah.
wisdom of Hobbits will help you understand wisdom of being human. Joshua says, good son is something else. What a
That's all I
great
remember
book.
from the movie, and I think
Yeah,
she drops her kid.
it's awesome. Sarah, thank you for that. Sarah says, Pastor Adam has a great sermon online from on Sundays. Oh, thank you. And an invitation for you to come, Matthew. So no pressure.
Up to
No pressure.
Portland?
Yes, well, we're online. We're online too on Facebook and YouTube. So friends, thank you for
You
being
want me
here.
to come preach a sermon for you?
You want to do that?
I've never preached a sermon in my life.
Okay. Well, we will make a comment.
I'll make sure to have 3 points.
Yeah, that's good.
I almost flipped them off the first no.
That's good. They will like that point very much. So give me a comment if you want Matthew to preach a sermon here. Sarah says, and I am an atheist. Sarah, oh, I
Oh
love
my
it.
goodness. I love
Uh,
that.
Awesome. Well, friends, thank you for being here. You can keep up with One Question with Pastor Adam wherever you listen to your podcasts. I also have a website. It's been up for about 6 months now, and you can go and subscribe to the website and get weekly emails from me. They're like a page, 2 pages maybe. Latest one is on. I forget what I posted yesterday. What did I write yesterday, Matthew? I can't remember. But the one,
Dude, if you think I know, you're out of luck.
oh, it was on Texas. Did you know Texas has required that the 10 Commandments be posted in public
Yo,
schools?
I heard that.
Yeah, yeah.
This
So
country's getting wild
it's
out there.
getting pretty wild. So
I never seen The Handmaid's Tale, but I might have to start watching it.
I haven't either, but it keeps getting referenced. So
My wife won't watch it. She's like, "We're not watching this.
it's
Too triggering."
it's a lot. Yeah, it's a
It's
lot.
a lot.
So
Hey, but it looks like your people are commenting that they want me to preach.
okay, well, we'll make that happen. We'll make that happen. So that sounds awesome.
And then Gandalf said unto them,
yeah, right. I've got an opening this Sunday if you want. So we'll
no,
we'll see what we can do.
I'm good. Give me a longer runway than that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You can also keep up with me at the Raven Foundation and on Facebook and YouTube, Twitter, whatever, all the socials. You know what to do. So if you do listen to this on podcast, love if you leave me a review. Does that help when people leave a review and give you a star or something?
You got to. You have to. It's. I've called it tipping your creative.
Well,
we're not. Most of the time, we're not asking for money. Sometimes we ask for money.
Yeah.
But if you want to tip people, send them a rating and review. It's free.
Well,
if you read a book and you love it, authors, podcasters, whatever, give a review.
There you go. You heard it from Matthew. You have to go over to iTunes or wherever and leave a 5-star review and a nice little.
All the cool people leave reviews, so let's get my
there you go.
And take those on as models.
And go leave a review for Heretic Happy Hour and Apostates Anonymous too while you're at it. So thank you everybody for being here. We will do this again next Thursday at 11 o'clock. Until then, everybody, grace and peace be with you. Bye-bye.
And unto you.
Amen.
Ameneth.
Oh.